I'm David Katz with the postgame, and today we're joined by Jedd Fisch, interim head coach of UCLA Bruins football. How does that sound?
Well, it's always interesting how you become an interim head coach, because it's always a very emotional, tough situation. The head coach part is something you always strive for, but the interim part is really not what you're looking for. How do you get there?
You've had one of the most interesting careers, I would say, in coaching history. There's almost no one who can say they've coached for Mike Shanahan, Steve Spurrier, Dom Capers, Jim Mora, Jim Harbaugh, Pete Carroll. We're going to get into all of that. There's a lot of great football knowledge and stories to tell. But let's start with how the last couple weeks have been. You get named interim head coach. You're thrust into a game against Cal with a 5-6 record, and you need to get us bowl eligible. How do you do it?
Yeah, that was certainly a rough Sunday morning when you get that call in after the USC game, where it was such a hard-fought battle, really an incredible football game in terms of the way it ended, 28-23, I think it was, and just a chance to wake up the next morning and start preparing, and you get a phone call from the athletic director that he wants to see you in his office, and a change was made. And, unfortunately, as close as to be here, I'm here because of Coach Mora. It was just a weird dynamic emotionally. They tell you, they ask you to do it. You feel you owe it to the players and to the staff to continue on all the stuff Coach Mora built. And we then spent 5 days really focused on getting to a bowl game and really leaving Coach Mora's legacy with another bowl season, 5 out of 6, and also giving these kids one more chance to play.
So how do you game plan something like that? Your role is different. The players have to react to the game plan you're implementing now on both sides of the football. And you get this team to win a last-second game in your first ever head coaching game.
Yeah, it was certainly, I guess it couldn't have been scripted better in terms of the final ending of it. It was all week long, we just asked our guys to play for the seniors. It was senior night. It was a chance for all those kids to go out there and thank their families. And we just asked all of our seniors to step up and to really give it everything they had. And then in turn, all of us give everything they had for them. Now, halfway through the game, we lose our quarterback. And in a 17-9 ball game, we wind up the game gets tied 27-all with 2 minutes left. And our backup quarterback, who was having a nice game, let us down 70 yards to kick a field goal with 8 seconds left. So the ending of it couldn't have been better to have a chance to go to a bowl.
You mentioned superstar quarterback. That's one of the main reasons when you came in here, you took this job, a chance to work with Josh Rosen. You elevated his game this year. Talk a little bit about what Josh meant to the program, means to the program, and how he evolved this year.
When I had a chance to come here, one of the number one things I looked at is the roster. And when you see Josh Rosen on the roster, even though I didn't necessarily know him, I knew of him and I knew the amount of skills he had. When you start getting on the field with him, you realize that his skill set is through the roof. The type of throws he could make, the velocity he could put on the ball, the way he could throw the football, all of it was just incredible. Kind of had a great opportunity all spring to really work with him and develop him into learning our system. And then by the time training camp came, it became much more of not just learning our system, but mastering it through the season and watching the evolution. And it was really unfortunate. I think he was 14 for 18 when he got hurt, or in this final game. We were 10-10 against Washington when he got hurt, or 10-9. He just threw a touchdown pass. And, so we missed some games where he was really on fire. And I think his numbers would have been actually even more impressive than they were.
What one thing do you think he improved the most on this year that makes him what a lot of people think is going to be one of the top picks in the NFL draft this season?
I would say that probably poise when things weren't going as well as he would have liked them to, how to handle pressure in the pocket, how to handle an NFL offense, a system where you're really asked to make the same throws as they're asked to make on Sunday. You're asked to make the same reads as they're asked to make on Sunday. And I think where his growth and evolution came is as the season went on, even though we had an incredible game against A&M in that second half, as the season went on, if you watch all of his throws, they continued to improve, and he continued to kind of master what we were trying to get done.
We're going to talk a lot about your offensive philosophies and your system and how you bring a taste of the NFL to the college game. So let's go back. Let's go back to this kid growing up in New Jersey who's an all-state tennis player, who doesn't play football growing up, who chooses the University of Florida. Why did you choose Florida, and how did you know you wanted to be a football coach when you hadn't played the sport?
Well, I chose Florida to be a football coach. And so I chose it because I was sitting there, and when I declared to my family that's what I wanted to be, or that's what I wanted to do, my dad said, well, if that's really what you want to do and that is your dream to be a football coach, you need to find the best coach in the country and go apply to that school. So at that time, it was 1994. Coach Spurrier won 3 SEC championship games in a row. I wanted to throw the football. I wanted to learn how to throw the football. So I applied there. In terms of what made me go there and get into the whole coaching profession, my mom's significant other growing up was a head football coach at one of the top high school teams in the country, Bergen Catholic High School. And I ball boyed there when I was 8, 9, 10, and just constantly being around the program and having film running in my house and using a wall to watch tape, and you just kind of get enamored with it. And I just declared, really at that point in time, the only thing I want to do is coach football. Now I had the backup plan of being a criminal defense lawyer, and that was kind of like if it doesn't work per se, if it's not practical to get this coaching job that I really dream of, my father's an attorney, my brother's an attorney, and I know that was kind of going to be the part 2. But coaching was really what I wanted to do.
So you bring up an interesting point. Is that why you think so many sons of coaches go into coaching? Because they are immersed with it, and is there something addictive about it, seeing and being around and talking about football all the time, that makes these people want to do that? I know my father was a dentist. The last thing I wanted to be growing up was a dentist. But for you, being immersed in football, it seems like so many people have parents that are involved in the sport.
I think it's a job you love, and rarely do people have jobs they love. So when you are around your family and you just talk about how much you love going to work and how much you love the winning and how much you love the competition and the opportunity to compete your whole life. And as I always say, it's like we get recess. We're the only people in the country that get recess still to this day. That I think what happens is you start saying, yeah, well, I want to do this also. I see how happy my dad is, or I see how happy my stepdad is, whatever it might be, and you just go with that. And that's kind of, I believe, why so many coaches' kids become coaches.
So just because you get into the University of Florida, and there are tens of thousands of students who do, many of whom are football fans, how do you work your way into the program? How do you get to say, I coach for Steve Spurrier?
Yeah, that was the hardest part that I didn't really understand when I got the job. It's like or when I got to school, I should say. When you get to school, you kind of think, well, you're the only one that wants to do this, and then you realize that everybody wants to do it. That everybody, there's so many students that want to volunteer and help and be a part of a program, and they see what's going on, and we're, at that point in time, winning national championships, and playing in one in 95 when I was a sophomore, winning it in 96 as a junior, and everyone wants to be a part of it. So you got to find a way. And my approach was I first applied to be an equipment manager, and I was rejected of that role. There was no spots available.
You didn't have the qualifications?
I was not good at that, I guess. No interview was even asked. Then I tried to be a student manager rather than an equipment manager, and I couldn't get that. So I started going the approach of I'm going to just start leaving letters on Coach Spurrier's windshield. I found where he parked, wasn't hard to find, and I think I went through about 420 letters over a course of a year and a couple months, and I just daily left little reminders on why I think I would be a good fit for his program in whatever role there was. I mean, it ended up being the Saturday Night Live making copies skit, but whatever it took.
Do you remember what he drove back then?
Buick.
Buick.
Yeah.
Blue one, orange and blue?
No, one was a blue one was a silver one.
There you go. So you get the job, you work for Spurrier. Talk a little bit about the influence he had on your career.
All of it. I mean, he's the biggest influence. I called him the day of the Cal game. And I just said to him, Coach, I just want you to know this. For one reason or another, they gave me this head coaching job tonight. I don't know if I'll be a head coach ever again. So I want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity. Because if it wasn't for him, there would be no opportunity. Whether my job was to be the copy machine guy for him, turn the lights off when it's time to watch tape, or by the end of my 3 years working for him, being up in the box and actually being a true contributor on the headset, he did everything to give me this first start. And what I've done offensively and what I believe in is really what he believes in.
What is his adage? If you could boil down his offensive philosophy into a sentence or two, what does it come down to?
I would say that every down is third down, that there's no rule that says you can't get a first down on first down. And really, it was an aggressive approach that you don't sit there at 2nd and 8 and say, how do I get 4? You sit there at 2nd and 8 and say, how do I get a first down? And I've just taken that approach. And I mean, there's obviously certain times you play smart football, but when it comes to just being aggressive, being attacking, and then understanding, it's a little more fun to throw it than run it.
I've noticed that you're one of the few coaches that wears a visor. Do you wear a visor in homage to Steve Spurrier? What's the reason behind that?
100%, because Coach Spurrier did. And you have to, there's certain things in this, in this profession that I just want to always give credit to him.
So let's talk about your progression. Where do you go from working with Steve Spurrier? How do you get that job? How do you move your career forward?
Well, what happened was in 2001, my graduate degree was over. I got my master's in May. And at that point in time, you got to figure out what you're going to do because your graduate assistant job is up. Well, that April, the Houston Texans franchise formed. And Dom Capers was the defensive coordinator of the Jacksonville Jaguars, which was an hour and 20 minutes from Gainesville. So fortunately for me, I was convenient. And I somehow got connected. I believe it was through Coach Spurrier, through Perry Fuel, through John Hoke, coaches on the staffs there. And Dom hired me. And I spent a full year without a football team, being one of 3 football coaches at 24 years old. And then I spent 2 more years with the Texans in a defensive position.
That was your real graduate degree right there.
That was. So that was incredible.
How do you go from there to your next move? Talk me through that process.
I was in Houston, and my whole thing was the summer before I took the job, I tried to meet as many coaches as possible. So I went planes, trains, and automobiles across the country to work as many football camps as possible. And during that time, I also ended up at the Raiders camp, the Niners camp, the Chargers camp, and at the Raiders camp, I met David Shaw, who's now the head coach at Stanford, as we know. And at that time, he was a quality control coach, just starting out. And we became friends, and he went to the Ravens. And 4 years later, they needed a coach, and he called me. And so that's how I left Houston. It was a chance to get back on offense. It was a little bit of a promotion. It was a little bit better opportunity financially. And I went and worked for Brian Billick for 4 years, who won a Super Bowl and was incredible 4 years of my life.
What was your biggest takeaway from Brian Billick and David Shaw?
My biggest takeaway with Coach Billick is the command he has in a room. I mean, when Brian Billick walks into a room, everybody knows it. I mean, A, he's 6'6" or something to that effect, so that helps. But B, the way he speaks, the way he presents, the amount of preparation he puts into every meeting is what I really learned from him. Like, you have to prepare for every time you speak to your team. Not just sometimes, not just only a few times. Every time you speak to your team, you have to be ready and give them something to take home with.
As a Ravens fan, thank you for your service. Where did you go from Baltimore?
After 2007, we were let go as a full staff, and I went to the Denver Broncos and Mike Shanahan. Mike called, and it was that tough 4-week span of not sure what was next in life, and obviously you're just hoping for that right opportunity. And Coach Shanahan called and offered me the wide receiver coach, the chance to coach Brandon Marshall the chance to coach Darrell Jackson, who's a first-round pick, and then draft Eddie Royal. So we had Brandon Stokely, Darrell Jackson, Brandon Marshall, and then drafted Eddie Royal, and that was my first ever receiver room, and that was just incredible. And Jay Cutler was our quarterback. It was a blast.
Fantastic. And where'd you go from Denver?
I went on and I took an offensive coordinator job. After that year, it was, I guess, 8 years in the business, and I wanted to see what it would be like to be the coordinator. So I took the offensive coordinator job at University of Minnesota, a Big Ten offensive coordinator job, and really excited about it. Like really, really thrilled to do it. And it was a chance to coach a really good quarterback in Adam Weber, who I was able to actually hire here at UCLA this year, which is awesome. And then also Eric Decker, wide receiver that's still playing in the NFL. And I had that year and learned a ton on how to do it, but kind of missed the NFL at that point.
So did you go to the NFL right after that?
I did. I went back to the NFL with Pete Carroll. Pete left USC, became the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, brought the offensive coordinator that was the offensive coordinator of the Broncos when I was there to be his offensive coordinator in Seattle, and they both hired me that next day. And flew up to Seattle, met Pete for the first time, took the job that night, and that was neat to be around Pete and to see how he built his program. It was year one, and it was really a cool thing.
Did you know he was going to be successful based on the way he was setting things up? He had success, obviously, at USC, but he hadn't had tremendous success in the NFL the previous time through. Did you just have this feeling that he had it all together this time?
Well, I just felt like I was around greatness. I mean, it was like you just knew he knew exactly what it took to win. And he knew what buttons to push. He knew how to talk to the team at the right time. We were a 7-9 football team that won a playoff game against the Super Bowl winning team. You know, the Saints won the Super Bowl the year before. We beat them at our place in a crazy game, and then went to Chicago and were playing to get to the NFC Championship game. It was extremely neat. He has a plan. He has a purpose. He has a really philosophy, and that was great to learn.
So where did you go after Pete Carroll?
I went back to being an offensive coordinator, and that was one of the hardest decisions. I'd say the hardest decision I made in this profession, or second hardest. Leaving Michigan probably being equal to that. But I went to the U. The University of Miami called. Al Golden was the head coach there. He just took the job. And when you grow up in New Jersey and the 1980s is your time that you're like in your formative years, I mean, and the U calls, like how do you not go? And, you know, I just took it. I took it because I felt like this is the U and this is everything that you see when you're a kid. And it was a very fun 2 years. I was the offensive coordinator there, and we did a lot of cool things and got a lot of guys drafted, and that was fun. But sometimes a different opportunity presents itself, and I had to take it.
So what happened next?
The defensive coordinator of the Seahawks, when I was in Seattle with Pete, became the head coach of Jacksonville. And he said to Pete, I'm going to hire Jedd to be the offensive coordinator. And Pete was awesome about it. And Pete called me, and Gus Bradley called me, and they said, we'd like you to come as Gus said, I'd like you to come as the offensive coordinator. I just became the NFL head coach, and now you're one of 32 guys that can say you're an offensive coordinator of the NFL. And I took it and enjoyed it and loved it. We weren't as good as we were in a lot of the other places. We had a very old roster, and then we went to a very, very young roster. And then after that, then we started 9 rookies our second year, and it was just one of those years that we were 4-12 and didn't get it done. So the football gods were looking out for me after that.
Talk to me about the emotional feelings you go through when you've had so much success at a lot of different places, and then you end up with a down year, a downtime.
Yeah.
How do you emotionally deal with that? How do you bounce back from that? How do you continue to maintain your confidence through that process?
I mean, that is certainly, you know, you get humbled. Humility definitely gets into the equation at that point. You kind of think that, hey, we're going to score when we touch it. We're going to move the ball when we have it. good things are going to come regardless. And you really start, number one, you realize that you're only so good. Number two, you realize that it's a player's game. And the more you think it's about you and the less you realize it's really not. It's really not about you. It's about the players around you. That's when you become really good, you know. And I think I needed that Jacksonville experience maybe for that to occur. Just didn't get it done. It was tough. It was tough on my family. We moved. But, you know, as I said, the football god smiled on me because they dropped me off in Ann Arbor, Michigan with Jim Harbaugh, and boy, am I thankful for that.
Let's talk about your relationship with Jim Harbaugh, what it was like to work with him, what you learned.
I learned more in those 2 years than I think I could that I've learned anywhere I've ever been. He just has a way to push you in a way that you might never have been pushed, coaches and players alike. He has a way that can help you formulate a plan and have a purpose and make sure that football is the priority and a priority, and really you understand, like, the best way to get good at football is playing football, you know. And my favorite saying he's ever said is, less is not more is more. And I learned that, and I think imitation is the greatest form of flattery. And over the course of the last year since I've been away from him, I feel like I've imitated so many of his messages in the best way possible. Because in my 2 years there, we won 20 games, and he was just tremendous.
Can you give me an example of something that you saw, the way he handled it with players, that you just said, that's something I need to adopt for the rest of my career?
Yeah, I think really, without a doubt, what I learned from him, hands down, is that if you ask them to do it, they'll do it. Don't sell them short. If you want them to practice longer and harder than anyone else, ask them to practice longer or harder than anyone else. If you want them to study and learn the most amount of football plays possible, then ask them to learn and study the most amount of football plays possible. It is not this, don't put a limitation on yourself or on them. And he just did that, and he just made you believe it and made you challenge these kids, and you were challenged, and find a way. You know, literally just find a way, and that was awesome.
Do you think that it's Harbaugh's influence from being the son of a coach, Harbaugh's influence from playing at that level and then playing in the NFL, or Harbaugh's his experience of being a smaller college coach all the way to a top-tier college coach? Do you think that, what of those elements of him do you think had the greatest impact on him as a coach?
I think he would always say being the son of a coach and being the brother of a coach and being a football man, you know, just being, and that's the coolest transition that I've had from going from Coach Harbaugh to Coach Mora, is that he too is the son of a coach and the son of a very, very successful NFL head coach. And, you know, both of those guys were NFL head coaches. Both of their guys are these guys who are successful college head coaches. Both of these guys, and just the ability to be around both of those guys and learn from them. But I think for sure the impacts of just family and football.
So now Jim Mora comes calling. You decide to take the job to move out here to Southern California, beautiful Southern California. 75 degrees outside today in December.
Yes.
Tell me about that transition for you.
It was incredible. It was an incredible year. We were able to achieve things that I don't know if people thought we would achieve. I think we were able to get the most out of so many of our players. We had an incredible staff. Coach Mora was unreal to work for, just treated my family, just treated our team in a way that you just love him. You just love the guy. He got the best out of this program over the course of the 6 years, the amount of wins that they had, the amount of, averaging over 8 wins a year, and just really kind of taught me so much about the emotional part of the game. And also, you know, his biggest thing was the head coach's job is to make sure that the team is taken care of. And he had that heart for these players that you really get to embrace and learn from. And I think there's so many different characteristics that you can learn from each one of these coaches, and that's certainly one that I got from Coach Mora.
So you've worked for this diversity of coaches who all have different experiences. You've worked on both coasts several different times. You've worked in the middle of the country. You've pretty much recruited everywhere through the country. Every type of kid you can imagine from every type of background. I'm sure that's made you a more well-rounded coach. Talk to me about what that's meant to you and how that's influenced your coaching philosophy.
There's no doubt that the different experiences have all been beneficial. I don't regret one move. I don't regret one missed opportunity or one opportunity I had. They've been amazing. It's obviously tough to constantly move and hope to not continue to do that. But you learn and you meet so many people. You learn about people. You meet so many people. The recruiting world has a mind of its own, and depending on where you're at and depending on where you're coaching determines really what opportunity you're going to have and who you want to bring to your program. And then in pro football, that recruiting turns into free agency. And in pro football, that evaluation of the draft turns into the evaluation in college of high school players. So you're always evaluating, you're always producing, you're always trying to get these guys to the highest level. You're trying to develop, you're trying to evaluate, and then you're trying to produce. So all of these experiences have been worthwhile, but it's certainly, depending on where you're at, kind of determines which direction you're going to go.
You're still incredibly young, yet you've been a coach for 20 plus years. You've clearly maintained relationships with the people you've worked with over the years. You obviously have the people skills to be able to do that. Let's go back. Let's go to young Jedd Fisch in school. You said your backup plan was to be either a prosecutor or a criminal defense attorney, but you wanted to be a lawyer of some sort. The Oj Simpson trial is happening. Talk to me about that, the influence that that had on you and some of the, if I can use the term chutzpah, you demonstrated for an incredible life experience.
Yeah, I was convinced growing up, prior to my right-hand turn to get into coaching, that I was going to be a criminal defense lawyer. I was going to be a prosecutor first. I was going to get as much trial experience as possible, and then I was going to be a criminal defense lawyer.
Any lawyers in your family?
Yes, grandfather, father, brother.
Is it similar to a football coach where everyone sits around and talks about law at the dinner table?
The opposite.
And they get excited? They sit there and they try to talk you out of being a lawyer.
Correct.
Okay. But you were undeterred at the time.
There was no question. So as I was going through high school and I was doing the whole mock trial and moot court and debate team and all those things were going on, that it was a struggle but I knew I wanted to give the football thing really a fighting try. And I felt like I could get it done, but if not, as this whole law situation occurred. So it was a unique deal. It was my high school graduation. We were at a graduation party, and the Bronco chase occurs. And, you just are kind of like, everyone remembers where they were.
Of course.
Right? Everyone remembers what happened. What happened after that is I went to University of Florida in the summer term, and I spent every afternoon watching the trial. Preliminary hearing at that time.
That was your soap opera.
That was my soap opera, exactly. It's amazing how much downtime you have in college, by the way. But anyway, so as I'm watching it. Now the trial's beginning in January or February, whatever it was. And now the next summer I go home and I'm lifeguarding at the local town pool. And I'm like, I gotta get to this trial. Why am I not at this trial? So I call my dad up, and his law firm was maybe 10 minutes away from the pool that I was at. And I go, Dad, you need to swing by here. I need to talk to you. So he comes over. I go, I'm going to fly to LA tomorrow, and I'm going to go get into this trial. And I'm going to say, regardless if I become a criminal defense lawyer or not, I want to meet these people. I want to meet the characters involved, the lawyers I'm speaking of, and I want to get into this courtroom. And he said, go ahead.
The courtroom of the Oj Simpson trial, the trial of the century.
Yes.
Okay.
And he said, how do you plan on doing that? And I said, I'll be the first guy in the building. So same way that I plan on getting involved with football, just be there first. So I did it. Well, I didn't really do it. I just got on the airplane to try to do it. And it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
Tell me what happened. You arrive in LA.
I arrive in LA. My best friend from high school, sister lives out here. They pick me up he's visiting her. They pick me up at the airport. We stay down in Beverly Hills area, and I take a taxi. I arrive in on a Wednesday night. On Thursday morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, I had a taxi pick me up, and I got dropped off at the LA Criminal Courts building at 4:30. Waited, first person online. There was about a line of a couple hundred people behind me, and I said, this is great. They take 7 people, and there was no one in front of me. But then I found out it was a 50-50 raffle, which was devastating because I didn't get picked. And so I had to figure out another way. So I talked to the bailiff, and the bailiff let me into the building, up the elevators.
You must have been a very smooth talker for the bailiff to let you in the building.
Yeah, I think security was a little different in the 90s than they are today.
Pre-9/11.
Yeah, so they were a little bit less strict. And so I got in there and went up to the 20th floor or whatever it was and waited outside the elevator. And as I was waiting outside the elevator, Sherry Lewis was a prosecutor at the time, came out, and I introduced myself to her, and she sent me into Marcia Clark's waiting area. And while I was there, I met the Brown sisters. And I kind of explained to them the situation. And
the situation being that you were trying to sneak into the trial?
Yes, the situation being I was going to be a lawyer. I was pre-law at Florida, majoring in criminal justice, and which is true. And I was here to experience this. And they offered a family pass for the next day. Unfortunately, court got canceled.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had to change my plans. And on Monday.
Undeterred.
You can't get a pass and then not get in. But the pass only worked for the day. So Monday morning, I went through the same routine, 4 a.m., 4:30, bailiff, didn't let me in. And at that time, and I said, you know what, there's got to be a way to go with the defense team and get in.
You switched sides.
Well, I did what it took. Did what it took to get in. And when the cars pulled up, and you saw Johnny Cochran and Robert Shapiro and F. Lee Bailey and Carl Douglas all arrive, Robert Kardashian, I kind of found my way through that lane, and I just walked in with those 5 into the elevator, and then the doors closed, and Mr. Shapiro looked at me and he said, and who are you? And I said, Jedd Fisch, pre-law, University of Florida. And he was kind enough, along with Robert Kardashian at the time, to let me go into the courtroom for that day.
Incredible. What was the experience like inside the courtroom?
Oh, it was just incredible to be there. The fact that I was listening to cross-examination of Robert Reeders, I think, of EDTA sock evidence was irrelevant to me. The fact of just being at that event and meeting those people was huge.
What did that experience of actually saying you're going to do something, which quite frankly sounds outlandish, and getting it done, what did that prove to you, young Jedd Fisch, that you use today in your life?
Well, John Harbaugh has said, and Jim Harbaugh has said, dream so big that people laugh at you. You know, set your goals so high that no one believes it. And I just believe that you should always I wanted to do it, so find a way, be relentless. I wanted to coach football. Find a way. Be relentless. And just, if I could encourage our players that same mindset, right? Like, if you want to be in the NFL, find a way. Be relentless. Just work extra hard. Do things that no one else is doing. So I share those stories with them, not because of me, but because I think, in turn, they could benefit.
So you had another life experience that was on the negative side. I think it was 2003, correct me if I'm wrong on the date. You're with the Houston Texans, and you had one of those things that people read about and, quite frankly, rarely often sit here and talk about later. Tell me what happened to you and kind of how you went through this process, this physical issue.
Yeah, in 2003, I was 27. I was out running. Life was good. I was coaching in the NFL. I was in my 3rd year in the NFL at 27 years old. Really no stresses in my life at that point. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and I were in Houston, and we were out for a jog. And when we came back from the jog, I felt this excruciating pain in my back, one in which that I don't wish upon anyone. And passed out, got back up, spent 2 days convincing myself that it was a back spasm until I got rushed to the emergency room and found out that it was a dissection of my ascending aorta and an aneurysm in my descending aorta.
So what happened with the team? How did you ultimately, did you make that decision? Did someone encourage you to go to the hospital? How did you finally, after a couple of days of dealing with this pain, decide maybe it was something else and I need to take care of it?
Well, in the craziest set of circumstances, on Sunday morning, which was 30 hours after I felt the pain, I guess, I went to a restaurant that I've never been to before in my life, and in the restaurant was our team doctor. And ironically, I walk into this restaurant, and Dr. Muntz is standing at this restaurant and asked me what's wrong. And I said, I just feel like I'm in some pain. And he says, you don't look good to me. And he followed up at 5 p.m. that night, and he said that he heard me on the phone and I didn't sound good. And it sounded like I was gasping for air. So he and our team trainer made the call for me to go there based on a phone conversation. And then he came in at 2 o'clock in the morning that night, ordered all the tests that no one ordered at that point, and I was on the operating room table at 4.
What did you have done?
I had back-to-back surgeries within 6-day span. I had to, the #1 premier surgeon in the world for aortic dissection is located in Houston. He was in town. As he said, if it was life or death, the string was dental floss, determining the difference. If it was, it was a situation where he had it was about a 7 or 8 hour surgery on a Tuesday morning, or Monday night at 4 a.m., whatever it was, and then he went back in on Saturday for another 8 or 9 hour surgery. And fortunately, knock on wood, all of the side effects that could have happened didn't. And obviously the first one being alive, and then paralysis, and then kidney failure, and all 3 of those things we avoided. And 13 years later now, 14 years later, I feel great. I visit him every year, and I couldn't be more grateful.
Incredible circumstances. How do you think this harrowing experience has affected all the change and everything you deal with? Are you able to compartmentalize the stress of your job because of the stress you've gone through in your personal life? None of this really pales in comparison to anything you face on the field or in work, finding a job, really pales in comparison to what you've already been through.
I wish I could. I wish I could compartmentalize that better. I wish I could take a step back and appreciate health first. And I tried to. Really what I've learned from that experience is when you think it's really hard and you really think you got no shot and you really think that things are just going down a very slippery slope and a windy road, if you're just willing to do things the right way, if you're going to live a good life, you're going to fight as hard as you possibly can fight for good things to happen, good things will happen. And I believe that. Something great's about to happen, always. And whether what happened to me, in my mind, I couldn't be luckier because they were able to find it before I died, because it is known as a silent killer. If I wasn't a football coach, I'd be dead, because no one else has team doctors, no one else has team trainers, nobody else has an ability to be able to have the team owner get you through to the top surgeon to get you through no one else has those things. So because I'm in football, I'm alive. And therefore, I am forever indebted to it.
Jedd, thank you so much for sharing your story today. It's incredible. And still at age 41, you still have 20, 30, 40 years left in coaching. So we look forward to following your journey.
That's the plan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.